Have you ever noticed how people start lying? Not when you become distant, but when you start seeing clearly. When you stop needing their version of the story to feel safe. Suddenly, their truths become harder to find. The pauses get longer, the stories feel rehearsed, and the people you once trusted begin hiding behind smiles that no longer feel real. It's like watching a magician too closely. The trick only works when you're distracted, but the second your eyes stop following the misdirection, the illusion crumbles. Or think of a friend who always talks in circles until you repeat their words back to them, and suddenly they get quiet. That's the power of awareness. It doesn't confront, it exposes. Because while they're busy covering their tracks, you have a choice. Keep trusting blindly or start listening with clarity. And when you choose awareness, that's when the fear begins to show. When the story falls apart, not because you confronted it, but because you stopped accepting it. So why do people suddenly start lying, and what does it really mean? Stay until the end, because once you understand their lies, you'll never second-guess your truth again. Let's get started. But before we dive in, pay attention to this story, which will help you better understand the wisdom in this material. The story of Micah. Micah had always been the kind of person others confided in, calm, patient, non-judgmental. His friends would say, "You're the only one I can be honest with," and he took pride in that. He built his relationships on openness, no mind games, no second-guessing. But one day, something shifted. The people who once told him everything began to hold back. Their stories came with missing pieces. Their explanations felt rehearsed. The warmth in their words was still there, but their eyes flickered like someone hiding a match behind their back. At first, Micah blamed himself. Maybe he was overthinking, maybe they were just stressed. But then the contradictions began. A close friend swore they were at home last night, yet someone else mentioned seeing them downtown. A co-worker denied a decision they both clearly agreed on. A sibling deflected every direct question with a laugh. Micah's gut started to ache, not with anger, but confusion. Why lie to someone who has always been safe? Later that week, he visited his Aunt Dana, a retired therapist who lived in an old creaky house by the lake. He shared what had been bothering him, and she listened in her usual quiet way. Then, without saying a word, she walked him to the center of the house and clapped her hands, once, sharply. The sound bounced through the hallways. Echoes returned from every room. "Why did you do that?" Micah asked. She replied, "This house is old. Its walls carry every sound. You can't whisper in one corner without being heard in another. That's why people tiptoe here." Micah stared at her, confused. She smiled gently. "You've become the house, Micah. When people lie to you, it's not because you're blind. It's because they know you'll hear what they're trying to hide. They feel your stillness, your clarity, and their lies can't survive in it." He swallowed hard. It made sense now. The lies weren't about betrayal. They were about fear. Fear of being seen too clearly. Fear of being held accountable. Fear of standing next to someone who no longer bends to confusion. From that day on, Micah stopped chasing honesty. He let the echoes speak. When someone lied, he didn't flinch. He just listened and remembered that some people don't fear being wrong. They fear being seen. Because when people suddenly start lying to you, it often means they're not hiding something from you. They're hiding from who they become when you stop pretending you don't notice. Before we begin with the first lesson, if you find these videos helpful, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on the latest content. Let's begin. Number 1. They fear losing control over you. Let's talk about one of the most telling reasons people begin to lie to you: when they feel they're losing control. These aren't random lies. They're carefully crafted distortions meant to protect their influence over you. The closer you get to the truth, the more threatened they feel. And when honesty risks exposing their insecurity, weakness, or selfish intentions, they retreat behind a wall of deception. Not because the truth isn't obvious, but because it would strip away the control they've worked so hard to keep. Here's the truth. When someone starts lying to you, it's rarely about you. It's about them. More specifically, it's about their fear of losing the position they once held in your life. Maybe you're growing, maybe you're seeing things more clearly, maybe you're starting to think for yourself. And in their mind, that's dangerous. Because as long as you were uncertain, obedient, or dependent, they had power. But now that you're waking up, their grip is slipping, and they know it. So what do? They lie. Not to protect you, but to protect their illusion of control. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes crystal clear. Seneca said, "He who lies fears the consequences of truth." That one line explains it all. Lies are not strength, they are fear in disguise. And when someone lies to you repeatedly, especially when they've always claimed to care, it's often because the truth would shatter the version of themselves they've presented. They lie because if you saw them clearly, they know you'd walk away. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Emily, was in a long-term relationship with a man who, over time, started lying about small things. First, it was where he was, then who he was with, then why certain conversations had gone missing from his phone. Every time she asked a question, he'd deflect, dodge, or give a version of the truth that didn't quite add up. At first, Emily blamed herself. She thought maybe she was too suspicious, too sensitive. But then it hit her. He wasn't lying because of her questions. He was lying because she was finally paying attention. And that terrified him. The truth would have meant losing the control he'd quietly held over her for years. So how do you respond to someone who fears losing control over you? First, trust your gut. Lies always come wrapped in half-truths and deflections. Second, stop confronting the lie and start focusing on the pattern. If someone consistently chooses deception over honesty, that's all the truth you need. And finally, understand this. People who truly respect you will never manipulate reality to maintain power over you. At the end of the day, people lie not because you can't handle the truth, but because they can't handle you knowing it. Don't chase the version they've created. See clearly, walk away with dignity, and let the truth free you.
Number 2, they want to shape your perception. Let's talk about a more subtle but incredibly dangerous reason people start lying. Because they want to shape how you see the world, and more importantly, how you see them. These aren't just lies to cover up mistakes. They're crafted to control your beliefs, your emotions, and your loyalty. They distort reality, not to protect themselves from exposure, but to mold your perception into something that serves them. Their goal isn't clarity, it's confusion, not honesty, but influence. Here's the truth. Lies aren't always about what they're hiding, they're often about what they want you to believe. When someone consistently feeds you half-truths, selective details, or overly dramatic versions of events, they're not just being dishonest, they're building a version of reality that keeps them in control. They want you to question yourself, not them. They want you to doubt your instincts, not their actions. Because the more dependent you are on their version of the truth, the easier it is for them to manipulate your decisions, your loyalty, and your sense of what's real. And this is where Stoic philosophy cuts through the fog. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The wise mind remains anchored in reality, not illusion." That's the standard. When you're grounded in what's real, what you observe, what you feel, what you know to be true, you become immune to their fantasy. But the moment you surrender your perspective and trust their version of events over your own, that's when you become easy to control. That's when the lie takes root, not just in your mind, but in your life. Let me tell you about someone I know. His name's Kevin. Kevin was in a business partnership with someone he considered a friend. Over time, his partner would twist details, omit facts, and create drama where there was none. He'd constantly say things like, "You wouldn't understand, it's more complicated than that," or "Don't overthink it, I've got it handled." At first, Kevin brushed it off, but then financial reports stopped adding up. Projects were delayed with vague explanations, and any time Kevin asked questions, he was made to feel paranoid, like he was the problem. That's when Kevin realized this wasn't just lying. His partner was shaping the narrative to keep Kevin confused and uninformed, so he wouldn't see the truth. And for a while, it worked. But once Kevin grounded himself in what was real, numbers, facts, actions, the illusion crumbled. So how do you protect yourself from people like this? First, pay attention to the patterns. If things never add up unless you rely on their version, that's a red flag. Second, trust your clarity. You don't need anyone to interpret reality for you. And third, anchor yourself in what is true, not what's told. At the end of the day, people who lie to shape your perception aren't trying to protect you. They're trying to control you. Don't hand over your mind to someone else's illusion. Stay grounded, stay wise, stay free. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a "thank God" and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 3. They're hiding who they've become. Let's talk about a quiet but deeply revealing reason why someone starts lying to you. They're hiding who they've become. Not because they're ashamed of a single action, but because their character has shifted in a direction they don't want you to see. They know the version of themselves you trust, admire, or love is no longer who they are. So instead of being honest about that change, they lie. They lie to protect the image, not the relationship. They want you to keep believing in the old version of them, the one they've already abandoned. Here's the truth. Sudden dishonesty is rarely just about what someone did. It's about who they've turned into. The moment their words stop aligning with their actions, when their energy feels unfamiliar, and when they start over-explaining or gaslighting the obvious, it's because they're managing a facade. They know if you saw them clearly now, with all the changes, contradictions, and compromises, you'd think differently. Maybe you wouldn't trust them. Maybe you wouldn't stay. And so, they lie. Not to fix things, but to delay the reckoning. And this is where Stoic wisdom strips away the disguise. Epictetus said, "Character is fate. What is hidden will eventually be revealed." That's the essence of it. A person can only hide who they've become for so long. Eventually, the mask slips, the habits show, the values, or lack of them, shine through. And when the truth does surface, it's not just a shock, it's a betrayal. Not because they changed, but because they chose to deceive you about it. Let me tell you about someone I knew. Her name was Megan. For years, she was known as the grounded, kind, always there for you type. But something shifted. She got caught up in a different crowd, started chasing status over substance, and her priorities quietly changed. But instead of owning that shift, Megan kept pretending she was still that same dependable friend. She said all the right things, made all the same promises. But her actions? They told a different story. Cancelled plans, cold responses, small lies that slowly built into something heavier. One friend, Jessica, finally caught on. Not because Megan confessed, but because the version she was portraying no longer matched reality. The lie wasn't just in the words, it was in the performance. Megan wasn't the same, and she didn't want anyone to notice. So what do you do when someone's hiding who they've become? First, stop clinging to who they used to be. That version may be gone. Second, let their actions, not their explanations, show you the truth. And third, accept that sometimes the greatest dishonesty isn't what they say, it's what they pretend to still be. At the end of the day, people change. That's life. But when change is masked in lies, the issue isn't evolution, it's deception. Stay awake, stay honest, and trust what you see, not just what you're told. Number 4, they assume you won't notice. Let's talk about a particularly insulting kind of lie, the one told not out of fear, not even out of guilt, but out of arrogance. This is when someone lies to you because they assume you won't notice, because you're kind, because you've been understanding, because you never confront or push too hard. They mistake your silence for blindness, your compassion for naivety. And that's the deepest twist. They don't just deceive you, they judge you while doing it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people lie not because they're good at hiding, but because they believe you won't look. They think you're too busy to connect the dots, too loyal to question the story, or too emotionally invested to walk away. And that's where the real offense lies, not just in the lie itself, but in the belief that you don't deserve the truth, that you'll accept whatever version they serve you, no matter how cracked it is. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Do not allow yourself to be underestimated by silence." Stoic wisdom teaches us that being calm doesn't mean being clueless, being forgiving doesn't mean being foolish, and being loyal doesn't mean being blind. The Stoic doesn't shout, they don't threaten, they observe, and in that quiet observation they see everything, the shifts in tone, the patterns in behavior, the gaps between words and actions. They notice, and when the truth reveals itself, they respond not with chaos, but with clarity. Let me tell you about someone I know. His name's Jason. He was always the laid-back, easy-going one in his group. Never caused drama, never questioned anyone. But over time, he noticed something off. A close friend, let's call him Mike, started making subtle moves behind his back, taking credit for shared work, excluding Jason from conversations. When confronted, Mike brushed it off with charm and excuses. "You know I'd never do that." And because Jason didn't react loudly, Mike assumed he believed it. But what Mike didn't realize is that Jason noticed everything. He just didn't need to react to prove it. He collected the patterns, tracked the inconsistencies, and watched the story unfold. Until one day, without warning, Jason walked away. No anger, no scene. Just a clear boundary, silently enforced. And in that moment, Mike realized too late that silence didn't mean ignorance. It meant patience, and that patience had run out. So, how do you handle someone who lies because they assume you won't notice? First, stay silent, but observant. Second, trust your instincts. Patterns don't lie. And third, don't warn them. Let your awareness be enough. At the end of the day, some people need to be reminded that just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're asleep. And when the time comes, your awareness will speak louder than any confrontation ever could. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 5, they can't face the consequences. Let's talk about one of the most overlooked but revealing reasons someone starts lying to you. They simply can't face the consequences. Not because the truth is catastrophic, but because your reaction terrifies them.
They fear your disappointment. They dread your silence. They worry that your respect might vanish the moment you see them clearly. And so, instead of owning what they did, or who they are, they scramble for an easier path. One paved with half-truths, excuses, and carefully shaped lies. It's not protection, it's cowardice dressed as kindness. Here's the truth. When someone chooses to lie to spare your feelings, it's rarely about you. It's about them. It's about their inability to sit with discomfort, to stand in the truth and accept whatever comes next. They want to be seen as good without doing what's good. They want forgiveness without confession. And most of all, they want to avoid the confrontation that honesty demands. So they choose a mask. They hope if they just say the right words, you won't notice what they're hiding. This is where Stoic insight pierces through the illusion. Epictetus said, "A coward hides not from others, but from their own conscience." That's the root of it. When someone lies to avoid consequences, they're not afraid of you. They're afraid of who they are when the mask drops. They know the truth demands maturity, accountability, growth, and they're not ready to give it. So instead, they sell you a version of themselves that's easier to swallow. But behind that smile is someone who has yet to confront their own reflection. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, let's call her Rachel, was engaged to a man who seemed thoughtful, stable, deeply committed. But over time, things stopped lining up. Missed calls, vague answers, inconsistencies that didn't sit right. When she finally pressed for the truth, he broke down, not because he was sorry, but because he was exhausted from lying. Turns out, he'd been reconnecting with someone from his past. He told Rachel he didn't say anything because he didn't want to hurt her. But what really hurt wasn't the truth. It was the lie. The months she spent believing everything was fine. The words she trusted that weren't real. And what stung most? He wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to protect himself from the shame he wasn't ready to face. So how do you respond to someone who lies to avoid consequences? First, recognize it's not love, it's fear. Second, understand that protection without truth is manipulation. And third, never reward cowardice with silence. At the end of the day, honesty takes courage. Cowardice takes comfort in lies. And no matter how carefully a person hides from the truth, their conscience always knows. So should you. Number 6, they've been lying to themselves. Let's talk about one of the deepest, most self-destructive roots of dishonesty. Not when someone lies to you to protect themselves, not even when they lie to control you, but when they lie to themselves. These are the people who live in denial. They don't want to face their own feelings, their own mistakes, their own patterns. So they rewrite reality, not just for you, but for themselves. And eventually, the version they feed others is just a mirror of the story they've forced themselves to believe. Here's the truth. The most convincing liars aren't the ones with the sharpest words. They're the ones who've already convinced themselves. People lie to themselves to avoid discomfort, to silence guilt, or to hold on to an identity that no longer fits. Maybe they can't accept they failed someone they loved. Maybe they're ashamed of a choice they made but won't admit it. Maybe they feel lost, but would rather pretend they're fine. So instead of doing the inner work, they project the illusion outward. And the deeper they bury the truth, the more damage it causes, because now they're not just deceiving others, they've become a stranger to themselves. Marcus Aurelius said, "To deceive others is weakness. To deceive oneself is ruin." That's the Stoic truth. Lying to the world fractures relationships, but lying to yourself fractures your soul.
You lose the ability to reflect honestly, to grow, to change, and worst of all, you start attracting people who support your illusion, not your evolution. It's a slow, quiet collapse that feels like comfort until everything built on that false foundation begins to fall apart. Let me share a story. There was a guy I knew. His name was Brian. Outwardly, he was charismatic, successful, always the guy people turned to for advice. But privately, he was miserable in his marriage. He felt trapped in a life he hadn't chosen consciously. Still, instead of facing that discomfort, he told himself everything was fine, that he was happy, that he'd made the right decisions. And to keep that lie alive, he had to start lying to everyone else. He pretended to be fulfilled. He exaggerated his happiness. He mocked the idea of change. But over time, the cracks showed: bitterness, cynicism, passive-aggressive comments. And eventually, it all came crashing down. Not because someone exposed him, but because the weight of his own denial became too heavy to carry. So, how do you deal with someone who's lying because they've lied to themselves? First, don't try to wake them up before they're ready. Second, don't get caught in their illusion. Stay grounded in your reality. And third, remember, someone else's self-denial isn't your responsibility to fix. At the end of the day, the most dangerous lies aren't the ones spoken, they're the ones silently believed. And nothing is more liberating or more painful than finally seeing yourself clearly. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply. Number 7. They don't respect the relationship. Let's talk about a hard truth. When someone starts lying to you, especially out of nowhere, it often reveals something far deeper than fear or insecurity. It reveals that the relationship no longer holds value to them. Maybe not entirely, maybe not consciously, but if someone can look you in the eyes and knowingly withhold the truth, then somewhere inside they've already disconnected from the bond. They've already crossed a line. Because when honesty leaves, trust doesn't just fade, it fractures. Here's the reality. Lying is not just about hiding facts. It's about where you stand in someone's life. People protect what they value. They guard what matters. And when they lie to you without hesitation, it means they're willing to risk the foundation of the relationship to protect themselves. That's not love. That's not respect. That's betrayal in slow motion. Because no matter how small the lie, once someone chooses deception over honesty, they've already made it clear. Their comfort matters more than your clarity. Seneca once said, "The absence of honesty is the presence of betrayal." That's Stoic wisdom in its most direct form. A person doesn't need to cheat or abandon you to betray you. Sometimes, all it takes is a quiet lie, a deliberate omission, a half-truth spoken with a smile. It's the moment they stop treating the relationship as sacred and start treating it as optional. And once that shift happens, everything else begins to erode. Your trust, your safety, your peace. Let me tell you about someone I knew. Her name was Emily. She was in a 5-year relationship with someone she genuinely believed in. They shared everything, or so she thought. But one day she stumbled upon messages that told a different story. Not cheating, not anything explosive, but conversations, plans, opinions that he had completely hidden from her. When she asked why, his answer wasn't angry or emotional. It was casual. "I just didn't think it mattered." And that was it. That one sentence shattered her. Because in that moment, she realized the relationship no longer held weight in his mind. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't protecting her. He simply didn't value the truth enough to bring it into their space. And that's when she knew something essential had already broken. So how do you respond when someone shows they don't respect the relationship? First, believe what they've shown you, not what they promise next. Second, don't beg for honesty. If it has to be begged for, it's already gone. And third, remember, a bond built on half-truths will never give you full peace. At the end of the day, when truth becomes optional, the relationship becomes disposable. And no matter how much history you've shared, without honesty, there is no future.
If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights.